We run a monthly webinar here where every month we have different topic areas. And this time we're talking about designing brands that succeed. Before we jump in and announce, and make introductions to our speakers today, I want to make sure that we also talk about the next webinar, which is actually going to be the future of design education in academia, especially with a focus on AI. Obviously, with AI kind of changing the way we think of design creation. How do the next design leaders tackle that? We're going to have Shangwon Lee and Helen Armstrong and another participant. We don't have a photo yet, so she's not on the invite. And then last but not least, next week, we're going to report from Fast Company Innovation Festival. I'm going to be down there actually for the whole week. So look out on the socials. It should be a great time. Let's get started. So I'm very excited about this. We actually have a pretty interesting group of speakers today joining us from the West Coast and the East Coast. First, I want to introduce Jeff Berman, who is actually located in Boston right now. Jeff actually is a theoretic physicist. Correct me if I'm wrong, or regular physicist?
At one time, you could have called me an astrophysicist, but I never actually did that work.
Yeah.
I never did that.
Realize that actually agencies are way more fun, and spent many years working for some of the largest agencies in the world. Lately, I've actually specialized in helping startups with brand and brand messaging. Yeah. And then we have Fabian, and I'm going to butcher his last name in English, so I'm going to make it in German, Gary Halter, which is how I would pronounce it, but how do the Americans say it?
Oh, in any way possible, but usually it's Gaia halter, like just with a halter, just a little something.
Fellow Austrian, calling in from the LA area. Fabian has spent many years, written many books, runs a podcast about branding, and also I'm going to cover this later, but also all of our speakers actually have made their own brands or have worked on their own brands, which is really exciting to me because not only are you helping other people succeed with branding, but also take that skill and expertise and do it on your own. So Fabian is calling in from LA, and then Adam Mefford. I met Adam in actually CES last year, and we became fast friends. He's right now located in Northern California, escaping the heat. Adam has worked with many startups in the LA area, and also is right now actually doing a startup himself. So I'm very excited about that. As we jump in, I have a question for basically Jeff, and maybe also for the table afterwards. You work with a lot of brands, and I love when you always say this, like 90% of all brands fail, or more, right? Yeah.
Yeah. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, it's
right.
95%. Yeah.
Right. And you made it your business to help brands not fail, right? I would love to hear a little bit about you were speaking at the CIC in front of hundreds of people every month. So tell me a little bit about like your shtick and how you feel the differences between people that fail and people that succeed.
It's a huge question. The biggest difference is that the people who end up succeeding recognize that nobody's waiting to hear from them. The whole reason I have a job, why people hire me to do this, is because founders go into this thinking that they're going to build something, and once they're done, they're going to put it out into the world and say, here's my thing, and people are lined up waiting for them, and that's just not the case. No one's waiting to hear from any of us. The latest research is 30,000 messages aimed at each of us every day. 30,000. I get up in front of people and say, can you remember one new message from today? No, because it's too much. We can't take that much in. So the foundation of success for any founder is recognizing your first and biggest job, once you create your thing, is getting anybody to notice you. And that's really, really, really hard to do. And basically the whole foundation of what we all do here, I think, is we are able to direct people's attention to things that are worthwhile for them. And that's a challenge. But the beginning is just recognizing nobody's waiting to hear from you. So good luck with that.
Excellent. Yeah, Fabian, obviously you've written many books about branding, and you also have, really kind of famous toolkits for founders and for startups. What's your take on kind of what's your take on best practices to succeed as a brand on a high level?
It's basically what Jeff said, like, how long do we have, right? It's like best practices. I mean, what I see, I mean, yeah, I can go into like the step-by-step kind of like process of how to build a brand. I wrote a book about it, actually called How to Launch a Brand. But I think what's really more interesting is where Jeff was leaning with this, which is the startup founders that I see have success versus those that fail are the ones that are unafraid to look within, right? The ones that actually say, okay, who really are we as a brand? Like, how do we differentiate? What is our personality? And then they're unafraid to wear that on their sleeves, right? And I think once they have that why and that kind of like inner purpose of their brand, not themselves, but of their brand, and they can showcase that, they can always go back to it. They can always say, like, this is who we are, and people are going to start to feel that. And I think that's really, really important. So to me, that number one thing is really defining your why, which we as people, as humans do, every week, every month, every year, right? Like, we're constantly changing. Brands do the same thing. Startups constantly change, right? They're not static anymore, like a Coca-Cola, right? Like, now everything is super fluid, but they need to have that one North Star, brand DNA, why, whatever, the thing, right? That's deep in them that people need to feel.
Right. Oh, that makes total sense. Yeah. And I mean, Adam, obviously you help many startups, and also you're building your own brand right now. As a brand builder, how do you take that advice from Fabian? Obviously, you guys spend a lot of time together in your own brand.
Yeah, so my experience, I split both graphic design and industrial design at Art Center, and then helped teach a class on entrepreneurship for over 15 years. So the relationship between creativity and brand, I feel, has a lot to do with the authority of creativity within the organization. So importantly, whoever we're speaking to, it's kind of how much effect can the creativity really have relative to the business plan is a good place to start. I also think a lot about to disentangle marketing from brand design. I mean, marketing, a lot of people just simply look at something that is economically successful and assume it is also a brilliant brand. But that type of observation doesn't necessarily tell someone who's building a brand what are the principles to make a relevant brand. So to your question, Gregor, the role of brand in the success of an entrepreneurial venture has a lot to do with if there's an established market or not. Most new offerings mature from a functional solution and gradually contribute something to culture. So if you're creating a new category, you first need to provide a functional solution. I would say Tesla is a function first proposition. And then later they want to tell people how to feel about them. Ultimately, what you're looking for is some momentum to the emotion people have. You want positive anticipation. So yesterday morning, Apple has their big event. All of us fanboys are tuned in. We can't wait to find out what's coming for us next, right? Because we've always got a return on the attention we paid to Apple. If suddenly Apple started making products that we just resented and found offensive, quickly we would find better uses for that attention.
Yeah, I mean, I see there's a couple founders on this call actually listening in, and I would love to hear, like, if a founder, maybe I start with actually Fabian, like a founder comes to you, right, and says, hey, I'm struggling, my dev team is in one direction, they think we should do this, my marketing is in another direction, everybody is kind of, not getting aligned around the brand values. What's your first advice to them?
Well, the first advice is that most probably leadership screwed up. So it's time to look within, right? So usually what happens is if companies don't quite know exactly who they are, what their values are, right? Like how they need to behave. What I do is I sit everyone down for 8 hours, all the senior leadership in a room, that was pre-COVID, and now it's slowly happening again. I actually just came back from Munich, where I did this for a rather large 1,800 people company, where we all sit in a room for 8 hours, and it's basically therapy. It's I'm like basically a therapist, because I believe that great brands are created from within, right? It's not a consultant that comes in. It's not an agency that comes in and says, hey, here is your big thing, right? Here are your values. Here is your mission. Here is your why, right? Like, no, it needs to come from within. So we spend 8 hours to derive that out of everyone. And what happens is magic, because after 8 hours, everyone is aligned in that room. And those are all the leaders, the product lead, right? The HR lead, the CEO, the founder, if they're different, etc. So everyone leaves that day after one day of work, rather than months and months of agency work. And they're all like, hey, this is us. Like, this is what we stand for, right? And so I find this extremely magical, and I've been doing it for close to 200 times now in the last 8 years. And so to that question, if there's misalignment, that's how it's kind of like a chiropractor. You don't need to go rush into surgery. You just need someone to kind of like work a little bit with them to realign.
Excellent. Yeah. And Jeff, I'd like to hear your take, because also at the same time, Jeff, you work with many, many founders. And, we talked about this before, right? Therapy is a big part of your job.
Yeah, I'm resonating really strongly with what Fabian's saying here. I mean, alignment is the key. We have an exercise called the Core Truth exercise that we do with founders and their groups. And it's really important to get everybody in the room, ideally in a room, better than this, what we're doing now, but ideally in a room where everybody can get together. And we basically get them to talk about what are we, not just to get back to what Adam said earlier, not just what do we have here, not just how does it work, what's the feature function set, but why are we doing this to begin with? Every successful founder I've worked with is very, very clear about the really, people talk about mission, vision, values. It actually works the other way around. It's values, vision, mission. And if you think about it, the values, the reasons, the things that we all believe at our core that never change are at the very heart of what everybody's doing. The vision is the way they see the world. How is the world different because of what we do here? What's going to look different? What's going to be different in the world because of this? And if people sign on to that, and you'll hear them talk about it in these terms. Do you get it? Do you see what I'm talking about? Are we both seeing this the same way? We all talk about it visually because that's how we're wired. And to pick up on Fabian's point, I mean, it's exactly this. When people share a vision and they can see the same thing and they're looking out and they have this shared understanding of where are we going, it makes everything so much easier, because inevitably you're going to get knocked off course. There are going to be obstacles, there are going to be obstructions, there are going to be pitfalls along the way. If you're clear on your vision, you can get there in spite of the things that come along the way that are going to knock you sideways. And you don't have to wait for senior management or the CEO or whomever to tell you, what do we do next? Because you're clear, you know you're going in that way. So much of this is a shared understanding of why are we here? What are we doing? I mean, I think the three of us could get together in a room and solve every problem right now.
Right. Yeah, I think what's interesting about this is also, I would say there's a bottoms up approach and a top down approach. It seems like, Fabian, obviously when you work with large organizations, you can't meet everybody, right? It's going to be, you almost have to like hope that the brand values permeate all the way down to like the practitioners of a brand, or the executors of a brand. But everybody, I think the same way that we always say everybody's a salesperson, I think everybody's a brand builder, right? Every consumer touch point is reinforcing positively or negatively what the perception of that brand is, right? A negative Amazon review or a delighted product experience or an ad that resonates. They're also all major influence in how the fabric of a brand is evolving, right? Or is perceived. And I think it gets really tricky in large organizations sometimes because, they get kind of muddy, right? Or like, what's the brand message of Pepsi, right? So many brands, so many different directions. How do you even navigate that, right? I'd love to hear from Jeff a little bit on your agency days. Like, how did you guys navigate that with like very large brands that didn't even know how to like formalize their own path, basically, right?
Yeah, it's a very different game with bigger brands. And one of the reasons that I prefer working with startups now is because the founders of startups and the people who work with them are actively working to change a specific thing. They're very focused. When I was working on like a Hershey's chocolate or American Express or I don't know, those things, the way to get at it was very different. American Express was interesting because they actually were solving a specific problem, which was everybody was leaving them because they were charging money when other people were giving it away for free. So for American Express, it was how do we make our thing feel special so that people are willing to give us $50 a year to use the thing that the other guys have for nothing. And that was fun. So I worked back in the day, for those of us who are anywhere near this age, membership has its privileges was a good way to do this, where they made it feel like a club. And that was a good problem to solve. But in a lot of bigger brands, I would hate to work on a Pepsi right now. I have no interest in getting people to buy more sugar water, to quote Steve Jobs. We don't need more of that. It's much, much more interesting and motivating to work with a founder who's got some vision that's going to make something better. And frankly, these days, I'm in the very lucky position that I get to pick who I work with. And the founders whom I choose to work with always have the two things in common. One, they have an idea. They are out there to solve some kind of problem. They see something in the world that can be made better by what they're doing. If you've got one more hardware store, you may be a great guy, but I don't necessarily want to work with you. I can point you to some people, but that's not what I'm here to do. You got to have some reason for your thing, making the world a little bit better. And the second thing is you got to not be an asshole. I'm sorry. You can't be a jerk. And the way I've come to a very clear way of understanding who is and who is not a jerk. There's a great book by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game. There's actually two books by that name, and they actually talk about the same thing. And fundamentally, we can divide people into two groups. The people who are playing a zero-sum game or a finite game. And for them, somebody has to lose in order for them to win. They're sitting at a poker table and they're going to take his chips, right? Those guys are difficult to work with because they're playing the angles. They're playing against other people, and they're always looking for the angle and the way they're going to get in there. The much more interesting people are the people who are playing what are called infinite games. And the infinite game, the purpose of the game is to keep the game going. The people who are playing infinite games are people who are putting energy in. They are putting something positive into the world. It's not to say they don't have any competitors, but they are doing something in a way that makes it better, that expands the game. I don't remember who mentioned Apple first, but Apple is like one of the quintessential examples of somebody who came in and just kept redefining the game with what they did. I don't think they're doing that anymore now. I think Apple is off track, and I think their company is going to decline because they stopped being able to do that. But the companies, the founders, the creators who are creating something new, what makes it worthwhile is they are actually expanding what's possible. They're making the universe better. And there are so many wonderful examples of this. Matt Ridley talks about this in How Innovation Works. It's a great book. So I look for those guys. And for the Pepsis of the world and the people who are just doing the old thing and they're trying to carve out market share, you know, as my grandmother would say, geh gesund, you know, you should, good luck with that. I don't want to work with you. I want to work with the people who have an idea. They're much more interesting.
That's awesome. Adam, I want to actually get your perspective as you work with many startups, but also are doing your own brand right now, right? So how, you know, what Fabian and Jeff just said, like, how do you feel this is affecting your thoughts on your brand and you know, how to go to market and how to, like, you know, tell that story?
Yeah, I appreciate Jeff's comments. I think there's a romanticism in entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship, by the very nature of it, is a high volatility activity. And as Americans, we hold that in very high esteem, and we love it when the, you know, the 1 in 1,000, you know, becomes a really successful economic outcome. I think brand is really fascinating because it's co-developed with your audience. The technical term is intrapsychic. So it's really important for founders to listen, to take that feedback, and to really observe people using their product, especially if they're promoting or speaking on behalf of the product. That sense of gaining momentum amongst a culture, so you actually get that movement. I mean, that's basically what's happening. It's like you get a shared belief, and it's almost like a stampede of attention in a direction, and that's when you get these just explosive, fantastic, you know, pop stars and streetwear trends and pet styling and whatever it's going to be. I mean, that's what makes American society so exciting, is you've got these things kind of, which are largely unpredictable, especially as social media changes just how much of a soapbox any individual has to play on something. I think people are becoming more discerning about where they place their attention. I'm hoping, not to get into politics, but I think most of us watched the debate last night, and we're trying to get a better return on our attention. I think we want to do that in purchasing decisions. But I wanted to say something more fundamental about brand, which is brand is leveraging the unconscious to get people to make intuitive decisions. And the challenge of designing brand or discussing brand is most people involved in the discussion don't really have the means of talking about it, and they're not actually that familiar with it, but they feel really close to it. And I've seen incredible conflicts amongst founding teams because people feel deeply, deeply affiliated with this thing that they can't really explain, but they absolutely believe that they own it, they created it. And that's a fascinating thing, but fundamentally it's about belief. So what Gregor's talking about in terms of, other speakers are talking about, founders need a sense of gravity. Like, your sense of momentum and fantasy and vision and momentum has to be able to bring people to it, and you're sharing that belief, you know, whether you're starting a cult, or you're starting a furniture brand, or you're starting a fragrance brand. That sense of, we're doing something, and ideally for the benefit of others, but we're doing something original, and we're doing something that's important. As brands develop, they become further articulated through different expression. And that's where I think designers really have advantage here, because marketers can use language, media producers can use media, but designers, it's just so many different tools to make an impression as to what something stands for, and bring it all around. The founder's responsibility is to take that intuitive concept that gets them motivated and build that into a series of touch points that can be maintained and kept consistent, and then take that through, whether it's social media or across language barriers or overseas or wherever it's going to be. That's the challenge of evolving brand without losing that central message, because otherwise it's just you end up with Microsoft, right? And that's where, you know, not to continue on here, but that's where I think technology and AI can be extremely fascinating, helping us find those additional permutations that don't lose the meaning, but solve the problem of contextualizing whatever it is we're trying to communicate as we bring more people into our belief system.
Right. I actually, Jana from Minnow, who's actually a friend of mine and also works on a new category brand, just had a chat for me. But basically, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about, like, new to the world, technology new to the world? You know, why should you exist? That's a different question than, something that basically is a derivative of something we already know, right? How do we, as brand builders, tackle that difference?
So from my perspective, the answer to that is you got to figure out where it fits. I worked with a lot of, we're in Boston here. So Boston is all high-tech, biotech, healthcare. That's the sort of the core of what's around here. I mean, I work on a lot of other stuff too, which is, I'm very lucky, but the core of what's here is a lot of technology. And often founders will come to me, I'll do a seminar and people come up to me afterward and they say, hey, and I always want to talk to the founders. I always want to, if you have an idea, I really want to talk to you. I don't care what it is. I really want to spend some time with you. And people say, I have this I have this new thing. It's like, great, that's a wonderful thing. It's a tool. What do you want to do with that thing? Because there's a hierarchy of creation. If what you're offering is a tool, the only people you can ever sell that to are people who know what to do with a tool. And if it's a new tool, that's a tiny, tiny fragment of people who are going to invest the energy, the mental energy to look at your new tool and figure out how it might fit their need. Your job as a founder, if you've got something, if you've got a new technology, wonderful. Figure out somebody who's got a problem where that is the answer. And often what we say to founders is, you got to make your thing look like the answer to a question they are already asking. Because again, nobody's waiting to hear from you. It's very hard to break through, very hard to get people to pay attention to you. One key here is making it relevant to something they care about. And that means finding someone who is in pain or has a really hard need to solve a problem where the answer looks like your thing. If you can do that and you can put it in front of them where what you're showing them is not a tool, but you're showing them a solution to their problem, now it's directly relevant to their concerns. So to anybody who's working in technology, God knows tools are wonderful. And it's great being around here. I work with biotech people a lot who have this. They come up with fascinating tools. And often they're like, we did this thing. It's like, great, wonderful. And, you know, with a science background, I can talk to them and understand some of what they're talking about. I don't get thrown out of the room right away as the marketing guy. But you got to understand how that tool fits into the world. You got to provide a use case. If you don't do that, this is getting back to Apple. This is where Apple is stumbling right now. You know, this thing they have, the Vision Pro, they call it, for $3,500 worth of blinders. A friend of mine said, you know what that is? It's birth control for men. Because they haven't provided a use case. All it's doing is making people who look like that thing look like, I don't want anything to do with you. Okay? This thing is not an answer. They show it walking around, and you know, Apple makes beautiful looking ads now, but I haven't seen a use case for that Vision Pro thing. And I honestly know one person who has it. And he says, yeah, it's pretty cool. He doesn't use it for anything because Apple hasn't told him what it's for. And he hasn't taken the time to go and figure it out because we're busy. We've all got things to do. Leave me alone. If you give me a reason why, tell me how that thing fits into my life, then I might be interested in. But you can't just show me this and expect me to spend $3,500 or $3 on it. That's fun.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think, you know, Fabian, as you're coming from your workshop in Munich, you know, obviously larger company, I would love to hear your perspective on kind of this new to the world categories, right? How do people think about, like, you know, I mean, brands, even established brands have to kind of think of new markets, right? How do they approach this versus like somebody who's just a one-hit wonder or like really is trying to kind of make a mark in one category?
I think you're getting into go-to-market strategies, right? Which is usually where my work ends, right?
Okay.
Because there are other people who do that. But the brand, you know, if it's a sub-brand, and I think we're talking about that, right? If it's a new product, if it's a new category, they are already successful somewhere, but now there's something new that they bring to the market.
Right.
You know, that the positioning of that, of course, is extremely important, and that's what educates the go-to-market strategy. And you know, it is such a complex question because it so much depends on the legacy of that brand, right? are they already leaning into something that can be leveraged in the story, or is this something completely new that they're doing? And if it's something completely new that they're doing, is it a completely new brand name, right? So we're literally starting from scratch, like with a startup, in which case we can talk about startups and how to position a totally new product, right? Otherwise, they're basically leaning into their legacy, and they're just saying, hey, look, something new and shiny. You've got all the trust of the big gorilla behind us, right? But you can trust us, but here's something new. And that's the big difference, right? There's the trust that's already ingrained. You've got the brand name, here's the trust, but we're doing something new, which is so much easier than if an Adam or a Jeff or a Fabian say, hey, let's start a new brand in a totally new category, right? Ourselves, bootstrapped, which I think all three of us have done. Then it becomes much, much more difficult.
Right. So the question is, and maybe I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but if you have a core value, it's somewhat easier to kind of find adjacent values for that, right? But how do you do it? I mean, you actually started a brand of something that's never existed before, right? How do you communicate that value, right? How do you communicate that brand? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, nothing is easy, right? So it's a lot to what Jeff said. You need to, if you have a dream, you need to start sharing that dream. And how do you share that dream? By people being able to envision it. And right now it's only in your head, right? So even if you have a product, in the beginning, you don't even have the product. You just have renderings. You need to already sell that dream, right? So I actually went out and did a Kickstarter without having the product, just to see how people react to it, right? Then I did all kinds of renderings that feels like here's the product in real life situations that people use, and here's the problem that it solves. But it's over months and months and years, right? I'm in year 3 now. And for those of you interested, it's actually a solution that stores vinyl records, actually records, right, in the hi-fi space. And you're able to actually flip through them easier and put them right back into the wall. So it's a crazy idea. It's a tiny, tiny target audience, right? An audience of males in their 60s, right? Yet I'm doing something that no one has seen before. And there's a huge upfront cost because, I have to create minimum, quantities. So you have to order like 500 of these. So it's a whole journey. I don't want to go off topic, but really to answer your question, it's very much piggybacking on what Jeff said, right? Like right now you have a dream and you need to make sure that people can see that in their life and they can see, oh, this is exciting, this is different, and it's actually going to help me do X, and whatever that X is. The thing, though, is when you have a Fortune 5000 that says, hey, we're doing a new product, yeah, you have the trust, but you also have the garbage, right? So you basically have them question, can you really innovate? Can you do something cool? If you're a startup founder, the one thing that you have to your advantage is you can be bold. You can be crazy. You can be weird. Weird, no, after we talk politics, but that word is now taken. Man, it's beautifully claimed, but it's claimed. But you can be strange, you can be bold. And I think that that's the one thing that I see so many startup founders be really, really scared of. They're like, oh my God, this is the one thing. My mortgage is up, right? Like I've got like this is my thing. Everything is so scary. They have to succeed. And then they play it safe. And it's idiotic because that's the only time where you have to be bold. Otherwise, you don't stand out in the marketplace, right? And so that's what I learned, where the brand name Tone Optic, it sounds like an old cassette tape from the 60s. And there's a reason, right? Like Tone Optic, it's very simple. It sounds like it's been there forever. But then the brand design and the language is all very young and it's different, right? So you have to like balance that. And back to Adam's point about the power of design, as founders who understand design and brand thinking, we can do that, right? There's a certain thing that the name does. There's a certain thing that the logo does. There's a certain thing that the photography does, that the language does, blah, 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 blah. But back to Gregor's point, you create all of these things, like their reviews, their websites, their social media, there's the packaging. There are these thousands of touch points, and I call them the brand atmosphere. It's everything that's around your product. It's the atmosphere. You are in control of shaping all of that, but it needs to be one thing in the end. That doesn't mean that every single thing needs to be exactly the same thing. You just form your opinion after seeing all of that. I'm going to go off my podium because there are many other people to speak on this. So.
No, actually, I want to double tick on this because I'd love to. Maybe Jeff, you start. The story of the power of storytelling, right? Obviously, the atmosphere. Some people call it atmosphere. Some people call it touch point. Some people call it like the narrative, right? Like, where does this come in? And I know I've seen you in action, Jeff. I mean, we're working together on stuff. The magic of storytelling is something when we really galvanize a message that resonates, right? And all these elements come together. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? When it comes down to how do we get someone to pause before they're even engaged in it at all, just to pause long enough to see, what do you have here? What is this thing? You know, it gets back to Adam's, what Adam was saying about creativity, what Fabian was saying about alignment. Alignment is, I once had a founder say to me, actually it was on another podcast, and the question was, do you ever feel guilty about manipulating people with all the things you do, like are using these tricks? And it's like, no. It's exactly the opposite of that. When this is done well, it's the opposite of manipulation. And it gets back to this word that Fabian used earlier. It's alignment, and not just alignment within the organization, but alignment between the founder and the people for whom this is intended. And often, the first users for any new idea, for any new product, before it becomes a brand, the first users are very much like the founder. There's someone who has the same itch that the founder is scratching, that led that founder to create this thing. And often she created it to solve her own problem. And then once it's done, then it occurs, well, maybe I can turn this out and share it with other people. And as soon as we make that decision, you know, founders have this moment where you can stay home. You can just code. You can just be on your Mac. You can just be in the lab. You can just be on the bench. You don't have to go anywhere. You can be an artist and do it for yourself. Beautiful. That's great. Be an artist. As soon as you want to create a brand and you want to share that with somebody else, now you have a responsibility to them to get your message in front of them in a way that they might notice it. And this is where the storytelling that Gregor and I are working on right now with a beautiful brand. We're in the thick of it right now with these two emergency room physicians who are going to save lives by solving, in part, fentanyl overdoses and people who are at risk of bleeding to death. It's a beautiful solution. The way to get this in front of people and to show it to them in a way that they might pause before they engage in any way, just to pause, just for a moment, just to look at that thing. It's always on a gut level. As one of my early creative directors told me at Ogilvy in New York, Berman, it's not left or right brain. It's upper or lower intestine. That's where we get them, right? You can't talk someone into paying attention to you. You cannot convince them why they should hear your argument. They're already walking away from you. You have to get them where it hits. And that means understand, this gets back to something, I don't remember whether it was Fabian or Adam who said this first, the story of why you're doing this to begin with. The reason why you created your thing, I think it was you, Fabian, the reason why you created your thing is the foundation of your story. Every founder has a story. Something happened. There was some problem. There was some moment where a founder said, this is not right. And that's such a great starting place. This is not right. You're setting up a story. This is not right. There's got to be a better way to do this. And that creates the story. That's the foundation, right? There's a problem. Now we're going to figure out a way to come at that problem. The initial communication with anyone who might use your thing doesn't begin with how it works. It doesn't begin with feature function. It begins with, this is not right. What's the problem here? Why are we here to begin with? If you're clear about why you created your thing, then the right people will be interested in hearing, well, how did you solve that? And it's important to recognize when we bring things out into the world, there are people for whom it's intended, and then there's a much larger number of people for whom it's not intended. And if it's not for them, we have to learn to ignore what they say about it. Even if that's our lover, even if that's our parent or our child or our best friend, if it's not intended for them, their opinion, you might love them, you got to ignore what they have to say. It's not for them. You got to only listen to the people for whom it's intended. And for the right people will be motivated by the reason you created this thing to begin with. Getting back to what Fabian said right at the beginning of the whole conversation. Why are you doing this? If you make that your message, the right people will be drawn to you. And you can tell it in the way we talk about it as a story, but it's not like a fairy tale story. You're just saying, this is not right, and therefore I created this thing. And the right people will say, thank God somebody somebody was crazy enough to do this thing I've been thinking about maybe doing, but I'm not going to spend my time and money doing that. But somebody did. And somebody came up with it, and it's like a gift. They should receive it as a gift. And that's the beauty of this thing. When we do this well, the right people are almost in tears because they're so happy that somebody did it. Oh my God, you solved the problem. Thank you. And they take it as a gift. And then the beauty of that, they become our advocates. They become the evangelists, the people who are going to spread the word and say, you're not going to believe it. I was thinking about this thing. These guys actually did it. Here's what they did. And that's how it spreads from the center out. But it's got to start with the people for whom it's most intended, the people who are aligned with you. Again, to use Fabian's word, the people who are aligned with you in the beginning, they're the ones who are going to make your thing be bigger than that small group at the beginning. You got to get those advocates.
Right. Yeah, that's really good insights, right? And I think you touched upon something, Jeff, which is the power of design. I'd love to hear from Adam, as he's really an industrial designer by trade and has played with really in the brand space for so many times. How do you see the power of design in brand building?
Thanks, Gregory. Great comments, Jeff. Just to address the previous thread, really critical for startup founders to identify is, are they creating a new category? Is it an existing market? Is it a new category? These are different things. If it's a new category, it's just a totally different problem, both marketing, adoption, and defining a brand within a new category, because truthfully, most categories are created by a functional proposition. And then it's also, try to explain this, it's only necessary to create as much brand and as much marketing as you need to make your entity succeed. So if you only need 10% of a brand to move 3 months or 6 months ahead as an entity, and you need a name and a URL, and you're a purely digital product, and fantastic, right? That's entirely different than doing a boutique hotel. So how much design and execution you need. And then to speak to the tactics of design, I really like the book Made to Stick. And Made to Stick emphasized frame the problem and then let the world bring you solutions. So as a startup founder, you're going to have various marketing responsibilities, various brand communication responsibilities. You're going to need key language, key terms. You're going to need a photo style. You're going to need color, materials, finishes. You might need a level of digital interaction. Pretty soon, you're going to need an AI chatbot layer to anything. My thermos is going to have an AI bot to help me coordinate with it. So these things are all on the horizon. And to think ahead as a founder, frame the problem that you need to address. So if you know that you have a logo and you need to make a motion stamp, when you're on Instagram, do a screen capture or save the post of other brands that are using motion in a way that you think is in the voice of the brand that you're building. So that's I think a better way of actually interacting with the broader culture and accepting inspiration from the broader world. As Picasso said, good artists borrow and great artists steal. A lot of stuff is just outright, plagiarized, but applied in a new way. Creatives tend to get caught up in the idea that we need to create everything ourselves. Like somehow it's less genuine if we accept a color scheme or a tone of voice or a social media marketing strategy from a different category or even a competitor. It's just not necessary. What you need to know is who you're serving, back to Jeff's point. How relatable is your category? I mean, that's absolutely essential. I don't know about fentanyl deaths other than it's a tragedy, right? So therefore, I'm not the market for what Jeff just got done describing. But exactly how relatable in an embodied fashion would be the question I would ask if I was involved in trying to market between solutions. Because a lot of the advantage of social media marketing is monkey see, monkey do. Whether it's a new fashion trend or it's a way of solving a problem, protecting your kids or utilizing an electric vehicle, it's fantastic to be able to simply show people and then show people the emotional payoff. And that's a lot easier in certain categories. So my product happens to chill beer. There's an instantaneous payoff when your mouth hits this 36-degree liquid on a hot day. It's 115 degrees in LA right now. It's like the Lord is shining down on the individual in particular at the moment when the drink is surprisingly cold in context. And it's the emotional payoff that really is the rocket fuel for the marketing of what we're doing. Entirely different than, say, a medical-based cannabis chemical analysis company in Boston that I was thinking of introducing you to, Jeff. But I was also thinking like how hard a marketing challenge fundamentally that is to like make memorable and relevant and emotional something that's purely analytical.
Right.
So to bring it all around, the type of problem the founder is solving, is it a new category and how relatable it is, and then frame the problem and then kind of gather inspiration in anticipation of future marketing needs. Because you don't need to do it all at the launch. You just got to move the ball down the field.
Right. Excellent. Well, we have 12 minutes left. I want to open it up to some, questions from the audience. Actually, the first one is from Cassandra, and she's a marketing consultant, or she's a brand. She works in branding. She had a question for Fabian. How do you sell an idea of a brand therapy pitch?
It's like, do you want to have therapy, all of you, C-suite? Doesn't that sound great? Yeah, no, it doesn't work. You can't sell it. And I think it goes back to something that Jeff said. You can't sell. They have to have a problem. And so usually the companies that I work with, they go through a transformation. There's something happening, right? There's a leadership change. There's a product change. There's something happening to the category. Something is happening where they're about to do something big. May it be a rebrand, may it be a new launch, may it be, whatever, acquisition, anything, right? The minute that this happens, they need clarity. They need clarity of who they are and how they are going to go through this transformation. At that point, it's like, oh my God, you can do this in a day? It's like, please come. We need alignment. We need clarity. This is great because without you, we can't do all of these subsequent things. We can't get the copywriter started. We can't get the designer started. We can't figure out the brand architecture. We can't figure out the positioning, blah, 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 right? So it comes back to something that I think all of us talked about on this call. You have to understand the problem and the need that they have, and you have to come right in then. Because if you just say, hey, I do brand therapy, you're not going to get a single client ever, right? So,
right.
Hope that makes sense.
I think you can sell brand therapy. You have to sell kind of the
outcome.
The outcome, right? Exactly.
Clarity. Yeah.
Well, it also helps that you wrote a bunch of books, so people probably find you through your podcast.
And it's called Brand Therapy, 2 of my books. So yeah, there's a little strategic game here too.
Yeah, I think Jana had a question about how do you create a new category? Did we answer your question, Jana?
I mean, it's a complicated question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So we make a food locker for DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats deliveries in high-rise building lobbies. The company is Minnow, as Gregor mentioned earlier, and we have it's a new category. There's an existing pain point with, particularly with high-rise buildings, with a lot of these orders sitting on tables or shelves in these very fancy lobbies. So we created a solution and we get wonderful feedback from our users. We struggle because we may be selling to the wrong people. So the users aren't the customer. The customer is the building owner. And delivery drivers love it, front desk staff love it, residents love it. But the people who are actually writing the checks are building owners, and they don't actually use the product. So we've run into a problem there. So we're scratching our heads a little bit, trying to think about how we sell this product maybe to campuses, because if we're going to survive, we need to. It's a pretty fragmented industry, the high-rise building ownership. So we're looking for other ways to try and sell in higher volumes. So, you guys, I think actually both of you, well, all three of you at some point touched on this, but at the very beginning of this conversation, you talked about creating a new category and how difficult that is. And we're running into that now. So, yeah, it's really interesting. If you have any advice, I'm all ears.
I think we all do. Jeff, you start.
You're talking to three people whose job it is to answer questions like that. So from my perspective, this is one of the biggest problems that many founders have, is when they think that you have a user and then you have a customer and they're two different people. And you're solving the user problem, but that's not the person with the budget. That's not the person who's paying for it. What you have to try to do here, Yona, is you have to figure out, for the person who's got the budget, what does that hone in on that person specifically, and ask yourself, what does her problem look like? Before you say anything about your solution, what it does, what it is, how it works, what is her specific problem? If you cannot identify a problem to which your thing is the solution, you don't have a market. You have to figure out a way that your thing looks like the answer to a problem she has. So just off the top of my head, one possibility is if she's the business manager of, so I happen to live in a high-rise, so I know about this. If you're talking to the person who's responsible for putting these things in the building, and that's who's going to write the check, the question is, what's her personal motivation? Not the building as a whole, not the company as a whole. What is her individual personal motivator? What does she care about? Make your thing look like the answer to that. So is she judged? Is she evaluated? Is she given raises or promotions based on the feedback of the people who live in the building? If so, appeal to that. Become the answer to her specific problem, which means you got to go talk to her. You got to go to these buildings, ask to speak to the building manager. Hey, can I speak to Billy here in my building? The guy's name is Billy. Hey, can I talk to Billy? Billy, I got a question. And just be a pain in his ass if you want. You got to get answers to his specific question. How do you like your job? How does that work for you? Who does your performance reviews? How are you evaluated? How do you get raises? What are you rewarded by? It's hard to get answers. Sometimes people don't want to talk to you. Reddit is a very good place to go for conversations on any specific subject. So you can go to Reddit, you can go to X and look for hashtags on this subject. You can look for trade groups that are talking about this, find out what their association is. Everybody's got their own trade group. They all go to Vegas, or they go to Orlando, or they go somewhere, and they all get together and complain in the same room and drink the same bad beer. You can go there or go to their website and see what they're talking about, but you got to understand how the problem looks from their perspective, and then make your thing look like the answer to that problem. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Adam, were you, it sounds like you had some thoughts as well.
I'll keep it really short. I think don't enough of a problem. So I would recommend looking beyond just the high rise waiting to be picked up problem, and think about maybe temperature controlled delivery from the restaurant. and then segment and figure out like what's the most valuable. You know, we're talking about urban environments, sushi and boba tea, like that. You know, those are the most high velocity, high margin things that have to be temperature controlled. So I would just kind of, if we had a conversation, I would open up more. What could you do that would just move you beyond simply the security issue, and then find more leverage points from the partners who are the restaurants, and then, you know, other ways of really retaining your most valuable clientele. So if you could intersect delivery with somebody, you know, not at a location that has an address, you know, by using GPS because you have a membership model or something, you know, that all of those things would help kind of. But that's working from knowing who's got the pain point and what's the most profitable segment of the food delivery market.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I was laughing while you were bringing up the subject because in LA we have those little robots rolling around.
Yeah, Starship.
And
Yeah.
there's great social media people just smashing these things to like pillage the food out of the little robotic. Yes. Anyway, it's a great space. So yeah, I wish you well. I'd love to chat with you more on that.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, any more questions? I think Michelle said, you know, yeah, Jana, what's the resistance of the high rises to put the product in? Is it just cost?
Yeah, I think it comes down to not like if you haven't used like a Theragun. You get a Theragun for the first time and you try it and you're like, oh my God, this is transformational. I've never used one of these before. This is incredible. It's like that, but we're selling a 275-pound, 6.5-foot tall version of that to get into their lobby.
And there's no pain, right? There's no pain. And I think I wanted to add to that.
Oh no, there's pain. Oh yeah, there's pain. They're seeing
if there
80
is
to 100.
pain,
There's pain. Trust me. They
if
see
there is
100
pain,
delivery orders.
So if there is pain, why can't you sell it? Because usually if there's pain and you have a solution to them, there's something wrong about the pricing or how it's being positioned.
Well, it's a very good question. That's a bit of the. So we have 125 units out there, Jeff. We have a bunch in Boston. I could point you in the right direction. We have some pretty much in every major city. We do about 3,000 transactions a week, and we just hit 500,000 transactions total. So, and that's out of a small fleet, right? That's a little over 100 units doing 500,000 transactions. So the people who buy them love them, and I think part of the answer to your question, Fabian, is it's a pricey thing if you're spending $50 on an IKEA table or shelving unit to buy a $5,000 internet connected food locker.
So what I would do, just because we're running out of time, what I would do is, Jeff is enormously intelligent. I'm highly intelligent. Adam is smart too. No, I'm joking. But you've got 3 or 4 highly intelligent people that only work on brands, right?
Russian nesting dolls.
to tell you what to do. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the right approach would be to go to your current customers that love the product, that invested in the product, and then literally talk to 10 of them of like, what am I providing you and why do you love it? Because you would never say it that way that they say it, and then you take the words and you literally repeat it, because that's usually like speaking their language of the ones that actually purchased it is most probably much better than any advice that we can give you. That's what I would do, because in the end, that value that the tenants see, it needs to somehow spill over to the people who are actually writing the check, right? There needs to be this value that they need to feel. And you're saying you're already successful to certain people. These people, they say it in a certain way. We have to copy and paste that, basically.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't go so far as to say we're successful. I would say that our users love the product. I would define success as unlocking the customer purchase, and so yeah, we have a ways to go, but I really appreciate all of your thoughts.
Excellent. Well, we are at the hour. Once again, it went fast. Fascinating conversations. Reach out to me. I can connect anybody on the call with folks if you want to get more details. As I said, thanks for joining in, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Take care.
If anybody, for what it's worth, if any founders want to chat about their thing, I'd love to do that. Okay. You know what? I'm going to put my website in That's where to reach me. Go to the contact page. If you're a founder and you want to talk about your thing, that's all I want to do all day long. I'm not dead yet. I want to help as many wild founders as I can. If you're one of them, I would be delighted to talk to you.
Yeah. Fabian, you should put your plug in too. Come on.
All right. I'll do it. Cool.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, it's always fascinating, and I'm sure we'll find more collaboration efforts here in the near future. So looking forward to it. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Gregor.
Thanks. Bye.